A chance encounter. The city stirred awake as the first light of dawn pierced through a veil of mist. Dr. Marcus Reed adjusted his rearview mirror, glancing at his tired reflection. Another restless night had left his eyes bloodshot, his mind weighed down by the burdens of his profession. As a pediatrician, Marcus had seen his fair share of pain, but lately, it seemed the world was breaking faster than he could help mend it. His hands tightened around the steering wheel as he navigated through the labyrinth of deserted streets. He wasn't even sure why he had taken this route, a detour from his usual path to the clinic. Maybe it was the nagging sense of unease in his chest, or perhaps it was an unconscious desire to escape the monotony of his routine. As he approached the old municipal hospital, a relic of a bygone era, Marcus felt an inexplicable pull. The building loomed ahead like a ghost, its cracked facade and boarded windows a stark reminder of its abandonment. He had heard stories about the place, rumors of hauntings, urban legends about what happened behind its closed doors before it shut down. Slowing his car, Marcus noticed movement near the entrance. His pulse quickened. A fleeting shadow darted through the shattered glass doors. He parked on the curb, his heart pounding. Against his better judgment, he stepped out of the car and approached the building. The air around the hospital felt heavier, colder, as though the structure itself carried the weight of its tragic past. "Hello?" Marcus called out, his voice echoing through the hollow expanse. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the distant drip of water and the creak of rusted metal. Taking cautious steps, he ventured inside. The interior was a maze of decay, peeling paint, shattered tiles, and overturned furniture. The faint smell of mildew and something metallic lingered in the air. Just as Marcus began to question his decision, he caught sight of something, a small figure huddled in the corner of what once must have been a waiting area. The boy was barely visible, wrapped in a dirty blanket that seemed far too thin for the chilly air. His knees were drawn to his chest, his head buried in his arms. Marcus approached slowly, his doctor's instincts overriding his fear. "Hey there," he said softly, kneeling to the boy's level. "Are you okay?" The child flinched, his body stiffening. His face remained hidden, but Marcus could hear the faint, uneven rhythm of his breathing, shallow and quick, like a trapped animal. "It's okay," Marcus continued, his voice gentle. "I'm not here to hurt you. My name's Marcus. I'm a doctor. Can you tell me your name?" For a moment, there was no response. Then, the boy lifted his head slightly, just enough for Marcus to catch a glimpse of his face. His skin was ashen, his cheeks sunken, and his eyes, large and filled with a mix of fear and defiance, pierced through the gloom. "Leave me alone," the boy murmured, his voice barely audible. Marcus's heart broke at the sight of him. The child couldn't have been more than 11 or 12, yet his expression carried the weight of someone who had seen far too much. "I can't do that," Marcus said gently. "You're not safe here. How long have you been staying in this place?" The boy didn't answer. Instead, he tightened his grip on the blanket, his knuckles white. Marcus glanced around the room. There were empty cans of food, a few crumpled water bottles, and a makeshift bed fashioned from old hospital sheets. The boy had been here long enough to leave signs of habitation. "Are you hungry?" Marcus asked, changing his approach. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a granola bar he had grabbed on his way out that morning. He placed it on the floor between them, careful not to get too close. The boy eyed the granola bar warily, as though it might be a trick. After a long pause, he reached out and snatched it, retreating back into his corner. Marcus waited patiently as the boy unwrapped the bar and began eating. He noted how quickly the child devoured it, as if he hadn't eaten in days. "What's your name?" Marcus tried again, his tone even softer this time. The boy hesitated before whispering, "Elijah." "Hi, Elijah," Marcus said with a small smile. "It's nice to meet you. Do you live here?" Elijah's eyes darted around the room, avoiding Marcus's gaze. "I'm just waiting," he muttered. "Waiting for what?" The boy didn't answer. He curled up tighter, his expression hardening. Marcus sighed. He could see that Elijah was guarded, and for good reason. Whatever had led him to this abandoned hospital was undoubtedly painful. But Marcus knew he couldn't leave the boy here, not like this. "Elijah, I want to help you," Marcus said after a long pause. "But I need to know what's going on. Is there someone I can call for you? Your parents?" At the mention of parents, Elijah's face crumpled. He wiped at his eyes with the sleeve of his oversized hoodie, but he didn't say a word. Marcus felt a pang of guilt for pushing too hard. "Okay," he said gently. "I won't ask about them right now. But I want to make sure you're safe. Do you think we can talk more tomorrow?" Elijah's expression didn't change, but he gave the faintest nod. "I'll come back," Marcus promised. "And I'll bring some food and clothes for you. Does that sound okay?" This time, the nod was slightly more deliberate. As Marcus stood to leave, he couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was just the beginning of something much larger. The boy's eyes, so haunted, so full of unspoken pain, stayed with him as he walked back to his car. He glanced over his shoulder one last time before driving away. The hospital, shrouded in shadows, seemed to watch him leave, its secret still buried within its crumbling walls. That night, Marcus lay awake, unable to stop thinking about Elijah. Who was he? Why was he living in such a desolate place? And most importantly, what had he been waiting for? Building a fragile trust. The sky was painted with shades of dusk as Dr. Marcus Reed pulled up to the abandoned hospital for the second time that week. His trunk was packed with supplies, a couple of warm blankets, fresh clothes, water bottles, and enough food to last Elijah a few days. The old building loomed ahead, its crumbling facade bathed in fading light. Marcus hesitated for a moment, his hand resting on the steering wheel. He knew he was crossing a line most doctors wouldn't. But Marcus wasn't most doctors. He had learned long ago that healing wasn't just about medicine, it was about compassion, about meeting people where they were, even if that place was an abandoned, decaying hospital. As he stepped out of the car, the cold evening air nipped at his skin. He carried a large canvas bag in one hand and a flashlight in the other. The air inside the hospital was thick with the scent of mildew and rust, but Marcus pressed on, following the faint memory of the path he had taken the previous day. "Elijah," he called out, his voice echoing through the hollow corridors. Silence. Marcus's heart quickened. What if the boy had left? Or worse, what if something had happened to him? He scanned the shadows with his flashlight until a faint rustling reached his ears. He followed the sound to the same corner where he had found Elijah before. The boy was there, curled up under his tattered blanket. "Elijah," Marcus said softly, kneeling down. "It's me, Marcus. I brought you some things." Elijah peeked out from under the blanket, his eyes wary but curious. He didn't say anything, but he didn't run either, a small victory in Marcus's book. "I brought food," Marcus continued, unzipping the bag and pulling out a sandwich wrapped in foil. He placed it on the floor between them. "Ham and cheese. I hope that's okay." Elijah's stomach betrayed him with a loud growl. Embarrassed, he grabbed the sandwich and began eating, his bites hurried and desperate. Marcus watched silently, his heart aching at the sight. No child should have to fend for themselves like this. "I also brought some clothes," Marcus said after a while, pulling out a thick hoodie and a pair of sweatpants. "These should keep you warm." Elijah paused, his expression softening ever so slightly. "Why are you doing this?" he asked quietly. Marcus leaned back against the wall, choosing his words carefully. "Because I care. And because no one should be alone, especially not a kid." Elijah's brows furrowed. "People don't just help for no reason. Marcus sighed. Maybe not always. But I'm not looking for anything from you, Elijah. I just want to make sure you're okay. The boy's gaze dropped to the floor, as though he wasn't sure how to process such kindness. Can I ask you something? Marcus ventured. Elijah's shoulders tensed. Depends. How long have you been here? The boy hesitated before answering. A few months, I guess. I lost track. Marcus felt a pang of disbelief. All by yourself? Elijah nodded, his voice flat. I know how to take care of myself. Marcus wanted to argue, to tell him that no child should have to bear such a burden. But he knew better than to push too hard. Trust was fragile, and Elijah's had been shattered long before Marcus had met him. What about school? Friends? Marcus asked gently. Elijah shrugged. School doesn't matter. And friends, they just leave anyway. The bitterness in the boy's tone was palpable. Marcus wondered what had happened to make Elijah so guarded, so convinced that he was better off alone. You don't have to tell me everything right now, Marcus said. But I want you to know that I'm here for you. Whenever you're ready to talk. Elijah didn't respond, but the tension in his posture seemed to ease just a fraction. As the evening stretched on, Marcus shared stories from his life, nothing too heavy, just light anecdotes about his clumsy dog and the time he accidentally set off the fire alarm while trying to cook dinner. To his surprise, Elijah cracked a small smile. It was brief, fleeting, but it was there. I bet you're a terrible cook, Elijah said, his voice tinged with amusement. Marcus laughed. Terrible doesn't even begin to cover it. The moment felt like a breakthrough, a crack in the walls Elijah had built around himself. Before leaving, Marcus handed Elijah a prepaid phone. This is for emergencies, he said. If you ever need me, just call. My number's saved in there. Elijah took the phone reluctantly, as though it were a foreign object. I'll be back tomorrow, Marcus promised. We'll figure this out together. As he made his way back to his car, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing at the edge of something profound. Elijah's story was far from complete, and Marcus was determined to help him write a better chapter. Driving away, he glanced in the rearview mirror at the silhouette of the hospital fading into the distance. He knew it wouldn't be easy, building trust never was. But if there was one thing Marcus Reed had learned as a doctor, it was that healing took time. And he was willing to give Elijah all the time he needed. Unraveling the mystery. The following morning, Dr. Marcus Reed awoke with a sense of urgency that gripped his chest. Elijah's haunted eyes had followed him into his dreams, a silent plea echoing in the darkness. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that the boy's situation was far more complex than simple homelessness. Elijah had mentioned waiting for someone, yet there was no sign of anyone searching for him. Marcus knew that if he wanted to help, he needed to understand the boy's story. But Elijah was still too guarded to share much. After finishing his clinic rounds, Marcus parked his car near the public records office, a modest brick building tucked away on a quiet street. His plan was to start with the hospital itself. If Elijah's story began there, maybe the hospital's history could provide some answers. The clerk at the front desk, an older woman with wire-rimmed glasses, raised an eyebrow as Marcus explained his request. "You're looking into the old Ridgeview Hospital?" she asked, typing into her computer. "That place has been shut down for years. Not much left of it but bad memories." Marcus nodded. "I'm hoping to find any public records, staff rosters, patient files, anything you have." She sighed. "Well, the patient records are sealed, but there might be some reports about the hospital's closure. Give me a minute." As she disappeared into the archives, Marcus's thoughts raced. He had heard rumors about Ridgeview, whispers of malpractice and mysterious disappearances, but nothing concrete. The clerk returned with a thin folder, her expression grim. "This is all we've got. And, be careful with what you dig up. Some things are better left in the past. Marcus thanked her and took the folder to a nearby table. Inside were faded news clippings and official notices detailing the hospital's downfall. Allegations of unethical experiments, missing patients, and financial corruption had led to its closure nearly a decade ago. One article caught his attention: Ridgeview Scandal, Families Demand Justice. The piece described how several patients, mostly from underserved communities, had been lured to the hospital with promises of free treatment, only to vanish without a trace. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Could Elijah's family have been one of those targeted? Determined to learn more, Marcus reached out to an old friend, James Langston, a journalist with a knack for uncovering buried truths. That evening, they met at a small diner on the outskirts of town. "So, you're chasing ghosts now?" James asked, sipping his coffee. "Not ghosts," Marcus replied, sliding the folder across the table. "A boy. His name's Elijah. He's been living in that hospital, and I think his story is tied to its past." James flipped through the folder, his brow furrowing. "Ridgeview, huh? That place was a mess. I remember covering some of this back in the day. Families were devastated, people just disappeared, and the hospital got away with it because they claimed it was all legal research." "Do you think you could dig up more?" Marcus asked. James leaned back in his chair, considering. "I'll see what I can find. But Marcus, be careful. If this kid's tied to Ridgeview, there's no telling what kind of trouble you're walking into." "I don't care about trouble," Marcus said firmly. "I care about Elijah." James nodded, a hint of admiration in his eyes. "All right. I'll get to work." The next day, Marcus returned to the hospital, carrying another bag of supplies. He found Elijah in the same spot, sitting cross-legged on the floor with the blanket draped over his shoulders. "Hey," Marcus greeted, setting the bag down. "Brought you some more food. And there's a first aid kit in there too, just in case." Elijah gave a small nod but didn't say anything. "I've been thinking about what you told me," Marcus continued, sitting down across from him. "You said you're waiting for someone. Was it your mom?" Elijah's body stiffened. He stared at the floor, his jaw clenched. "It's okay," Marcus said softly. "You don't have to tell me everything right now. But if you do want to talk, I'm here to listen." After a long silence, Elijah finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "She said she'd come back. She told me to wait here." Marcus's chest tightened. "How long ago was that?" Elijah shrugged, his eyes glassy. "I don't know. A while." "Do you remember what happened before she left?" Marcus asked gently. Elijah's hands gripped the edges of the blanket. "There were people. Men in white coats. They said they were going to help her, but they hurt her instead." Marcus's stomach dropped. "What do you mean, they hurt her?" Elijah shook his head, tears welling up in his eyes. "I don't want to talk about it." "Okay," Marcus said quickly. "You don't have to." The boy curled into himself, his small frame trembling. Marcus felt helpless. Whatever Elijah had witnessed, it had left scars far deeper than those on his skin. Later that evening, James called with an update. "You're not gonna like this," James began. "I found some old court records tied to Ridgeview. Turns out, they were running experimental drug trials on patients, most of whom were poor and desperate. They claimed it was voluntary, but a lot of people say they were coerced." Marcus gripped the phone tightly. "Did you find anything about a woman with a child?" "Not directly," James admitted. "But there's a list of patients who were never accounted for. I'll send it to you. Maybe something will stand out." When the list arrived, Marcus scanned it, his eyes catching on one name, Monica Bennett. A single mother, admitted for a supposed chronic illness treatment. listed as missing after the hospital's closure. Elijah Bennett, Marcus murmured to himself, the pieces falling into place. He knew then that Elijah's mother had been one of Ridgeview's victims. And Elijah, too young to understand the full extent of what had happened, had been left behind to pick up the pieces. The next time Marcus visited Elijah, he brought the boy's name up carefully. "Elijah, was your mom's name Monica?" Elijah froze, his eyes wide. "How do you know that?" "I've been trying to understand what happened to you," Marcus said gently. "I think your mom was really brave. She wanted to protect you." Tears spilled down Elijah's cheeks. "She told me to stay here so they wouldn't find me. She said she'd come back. But she didn't." Marcus moved closer, placing a comforting hand on Elijah's shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Elijah. But I promise, we're going to figure this out. You're not alone anymore." For the first time, Elijah leaned into Marcus, his small frame racked with sobs. It was the first step toward breaking down the walls he had built, and Marcus knew it wouldn't be the last. But as he held the boy, Marcus couldn't shake the growing sense of unease. The more he uncovered about Ridgeview, the more it felt like a Pandora's box, one that might lead them both into even darker territory. Secrets in the shadows. The morning air was crisp, the sky a dull gray as Marcus parked his car in front of the abandoned Ridgeview Hospital. The structure stood like a monument to forgotten pain, its walls marred by years of neglect. Vines clung to the cracked facade, as if nature itself was trying to erase its existence. Elijah walked beside Marcus, his small frame bundled in the thick hoodie Marcus had given him. There was a wary tension in his steps, as though each creak of the hospital floorboards carried the weight of memories he'd rather forget. "You sure you're okay with this?" Marcus asked, glancing down at him. Elijah nodded stiffly. "If you want to know the truth, this is where it starts." The boy's words hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus knew they were standing at the threshold of something dangerous, something that had claimed countless lives and nearly swallowed Elijah whole. They navigated the dim hallways, the beam of Marcus's flashlight cutting through the gloom. Faded signs hung crookedly on the walls: pediatrics, radiology, research wing. "Where did they take your mom?" Marcus asked gently. Elijah's face tightened. "Downstairs. The labs." Marcus's heart sank. He had read about the secretive basement levels of Ridgeview, places where unauthorized experiments had allegedly taken place. They found the staircase leading down, its metal steps slick with moisture. The air grew colder with each step, thick with the scent of decay and chemicals long since abandoned. At the bottom of the stairs, a rusted door stood ajar. Beyond it lay a vast, dark room filled with rows of gurneys and broken equipment. Cabinets lined the walls, their glass fronts shattered. Elijah's breathing quickened. "This is where they kept us." Marcus knelt beside him. "You don't have to be here, Elijah. We can leave any time." "No," Elijah said firmly, though his voice trembled. "I need to do this." Marcus nodded, his respect for the boy growing. "All right. Let's do it together." They moved deeper into the room, the beam of the flashlight revealing disturbing remnants of the past, faded medical charts, syringes scattered across the floor, and what looked like makeshift examination tables. What were they doing down here? Marcus muttered, more to himself than to Elijah. "They said they were trying to help us," Elijah said bitterly. "But they hurt people instead. My mom figured out what they were really doing. That's why they took her." Marcus's chest tightened. "Do you remember what she found out?" Elijah shook his head. "Just that it was bad. Real bad." As they searched the room, Marcus's flashlight landed on a locked metal cabinet in the corner. The paint was chipped, and the lock was rusted but still intact. "This might be important," Marcus said, examining the cabinet. Elijah spotted a crowbar among the scattered tools and handed it to Marcus. "Here." With a few forceful pries, the lock gave way, and the cabinet creaked open. Inside were stacks of dusty files and several thick binders labeled Project Renewal. Marcus's heart raced as he flipped through the pages. The documents detailed experimental treatments involving gene therapy and neural manipulation, procedures that had never been approved for human trials. The patients listed were mostly single parents and their children, many of whom had been reported missing after the hospital's closure. "This is it," Marcus whispered. "Proof of what they were doing." Elijah's voice was hollow. "They treated us like experiments." Marcus clenched his jaw, a surge of anger rising within him. "Not anymore. We're going to expose this." Back at Marcus's home, they spread the files across the kitchen table. Elijah sat quietly, his eyes scanning the documents with a mixture of anger and sadness. "We need to take this to someone who can help," Marcus said. "These people need to be held accountable." Elijah's gaze darkened. "They won't stop. They'll come after us." Marcus placed a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. "Not if we're smart about it. I have a friend who's a journalist. He'll know what to do." As if on cue, Marcus's phone buzzed. It was James. "Marcus," James said urgently, "I've got news." I dug deeper into Ridgeview, and it looks like some of the people involved are still operating under different names. They've got ties to powerful organizations. You need to be careful. "We found evidence," Marcus said, his voice steady. "Files that prove everything." James's tone sharpened. "Good. Get them to me. But be discreet, these people don't play fair." After ending the call, Marcus turned to Elijah. "We're going to meet James tomorrow. He'll help us." Elijah nodded, though his expression remained troubled. "What if they come for us tonight?" "They won't," Marcus promised, though he wasn't entirely sure. That night, Marcus made sure every door and window was locked. He set up a makeshift bed for Elijah in the guest room, but the boy couldn't sleep. "You think they'll ever stop?" Elijah asked quietly. Marcus sat beside him. "I don't know. But I do know one thing, you're not alone anymore. We'll fight this together." Elijah's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I never thought I'd have someone to fight for me." Marcus's voice was firm. "You deserve that and so much more." As the night stretched on, Marcus kept watch, his resolve hardening. The truth was out there now, and he would stop at nothing to protect Elijah and bring justice to those who had suffered. But he knew the fight was only just beginning. And the shadows of Ridgeview still loomed large. The pursuit of justice. The next morning dawned with an eerie stillness, as if the world was holding its breath. Marcus's house sat cloaked in fog, the air thick with tension. The files from Ridgeview were neatly packed into a secure briefcase, ready for their meeting with James. Elijah sat at the kitchen table, nervously picking at a plate of scrambled eggs. He hadn't said much since they had uncovered the truth in the hospital's basement. His usual guarded expression had been replaced by a haunted look that tugged at Marcus's heart. "You doing okay?" Marcus asked gently as he sipped his coffee. Elijah shrugged. "Just thinking about my mom. I wonder if she knew they were going to take her." Marcus set his cup down. "Your mom was brave. She did everything she could to protect you. And now it's our turn to fight for her, and for everyone else they hurt." Elijah nodded slowly. "I want to be brave too." "You already are," Marcus said firmly. They left the house just after sunrise, the briefcase secured in the trunk of Marcus's car. The drive to the diner where they were meeting James was tense, both of them hyper-aware of their surroundings. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "Do you think they know we have the files?" Elijah asked, his voice low. "It's possible," Marcus admitted. But we're going to be careful. James is good at this kind of thing. He'll know how to handle it. As they approached the diner, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from James, running late. Be there in 15. Marcus sighed. Looks like we've got some time to kill. They parked and went inside, choosing a booth near the back. The diner was quiet, only a few patrons scattered throughout. Elijah fidgeted with the edge of the menu. What if something happens to James? Marcus leaned forward. Nothing's going to happen. We've got this under control. But even as he spoke, a sense of unease crept over him. 15 minutes turned into 30, and James still hadn't arrived. Marcus's worry grew with each passing second. He tried calling, but the call went straight to voicemail. Something was wrong. We need to go, Marcus said, throwing cash on the table. Elijah's eyes widened. What's happening? I'm not sure, Marcus admitted, but I'm not waiting around to find out. They hurried back to the car, but as Marcus unlocked the doors, he spotted a black SUV parked across the street. Two men in suits were seated inside, their eyes trained on him and Elijah. Get in, Marcus instructed urgently. As soon as they were inside, he started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot. The SUV followed. Are they from Ridgeview? Elijah asked, panic creeping into his voice. Probably, Marcus said grimly. But they're not getting us. He navigated through the streets, weaving in and out of traffic. The SUV stayed on their tail, its presence a constant threat. Hold on, Marcus warned as he made a sharp turn onto a narrow side street. The tires screeched, but the SUV was relentless. Marcus's mind raced, searching for an escape route. Up ahead, he spotted an alleyway partially obscured by a stack of crates. It was risky, but they didn't have much choice. Hang tight. Marcus shouted as he veered into the alley. The car barely squeezed through, the side mirrors scraping against the walls. The SUV skidded to a halt at the entrance, unable to follow. Marcus didn't stop until they were several blocks away, hidden behind an abandoned warehouse. His heart pounded as he cut the engine. You okay? He asked Elijah. The boy nodded, though his face was pale. Yeah. That was intense. Marcus managed a shaky laugh. You're telling me. After catching their breath, Marcus made a decision. We can't go to James. It's too dangerous. We need a new plan. Elijah's voice was firm. We have to get those files out there. People need to know the truth. Marcus admired the boy's determination. You're right. And I know just the person who can help. They drove to a secure location, an old friend's cabin nestled deep in the woods. The friend, Dr. Lila Morgan, was a former whistleblower who had exposed corruption in the pharmaceutical industry. Lila greeted them with a warm but concerned smile. Marcus, what are you into now? Something big, Marcus admitted as they stepped inside. We need your help. Lila listened intently as Marcus and Elijah explained everything, the experiments at Ridgeview, Monica's disappearance, and the files they had uncovered. This is explosive, Lila said, her eyes sharp. But you're right, people need to know. We'll digitize the files and send them to trusted journalists and legal advocates. They can't silence everyone. Elijah's voice was steady. What if they come after us? They might try, Lila admitted, but we'll be ready. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Lila's cabin became a war room, with laptops humming and files being scanned and encrypted. Elijah proved surprisingly adept at organizing the data, his sharp mind focused on the task at hand. You're pretty good at this, Lila remarked. Elijah shrugged. I've had to figure out a lot of things on my own. Well, you've got a future in cybersecurity if you want it, she said with a grin. As night fell, The files were securely uploaded to multiple platforms, ensuring that the truth would be seen by thousands, if not millions. "We did it," Marcus said, a sense of relief washing over him. Elijah's expression softened. "My mom would be proud, right?" "She would be," Marcus assured him. "You're brave, just like her." But even as they celebrated their victory, Marcus knew the fight wasn't over. The people behind Ridgeview wouldn't go down without a battle. Still, they had taken the first step toward justice, and for the first time in a long time, hope glimmered on the horizon. A new dawn of justice. The chill of dawn settled over the wooded landscape surrounding Dr. Lila Morgan's secluded cabin. The early morning mist curled around the trees like ghostly tendrils, a stark contrast to the storm of danger that lingered in Marcus's mind. Inside the cabin, the air was filled with the hum of electronics and the faint aroma of coffee. Lila sat at the dining table, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she monitored encrypted communication channels. Elijah leaned against the counter, his eyes heavy with exhaustion but still alert. "We're not out of the woods yet," Marcus said, pacing near the window. "They're going to come after us once they realize the files are out." Lila's gaze remained fixed on the screen. "They're already scrambling. Multiple media outlets have picked up the story. Social media is exploding with outrage over the Ridgeview experiments." Elijah's voice was quiet but firm. "Good. They deserve it." Marcus placed a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. "You did good, Elijah. Your mom would be proud." The boy's lips trembled slightly, but he held his head high. "I just want people to know the truth. And I want her to be remembered for what she tried to do." "She will be," Lila promised. "But we need to stay vigilant. They won't go down without a fight." Later that morning, the tranquility of the forest was shattered by the distant hum of engines. Marcus's instincts kicked into overdrive. He moved to the window and spotted 3 black SUVs approaching along the dirt road leading to the cabin. "They found us," Marcus said grimly. Lila's expression hardened. "I'll lock down the system. They won't get their hands on this data." "Elijah, stay with Lila," Marcus ordered. "No," Elijah protested. "I'm not hiding anymore." Marcus knelt in front of him, his voice steady but urgent. "You've already done your part, Elijah. You're the reason we have a chance to stop them. Let me handle this." Elijah hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Marcus grabbed a shotgun from the cabin's weapon stash, a precaution Lila had taken after years of threats from powerful enemies. He stepped onto the porch, his heart pounding but his resolve unshaken. The SUVs screeched to a halt, and a group of men in tactical gear poured out, their faces obscured by masks. One man, taller than the rest, stepped forward with a confident swagger. "Dr. Hay," the man called out. "We just want the files. Hand them over, and no one gets hurt." Marcus leveled the shotgun at him. "You've already hurt enough people. You're not getting anything." The man's smile was cold. "Brave words, but this isn't a fight you can win." "We'll see about that," Marcus growled. Before the man could respond, Lila activated the cabin's security system. Automated defenses sprang to life, steel shutters descended over the windows, and a high-pitched alarm blared through the woods. The mercenaries opened fire, bullets ricocheting off the reinforced walls. Marcus returned fire, aiming to keep them at bay. Inside the cabin, Elijah watched with wide eyes. "We can't just sit here." Lila's voice was calm but firm. "We're not. I'm sending out a distress signal to my contacts. Help is on the way." Elijah's mind raced. "What if they break in?" "They won't," Lila assured him. "This place is a fortress." Outside, Marcus's ammunition was running low. The mercenaries were relentless, but he refused to back down. His determination was fueled by the thought of Elijah and all the other children who had suffered because of Ridgeview's twisted experiments. Suddenly, the roar of additional engines echoed through the forest. Marcus's heart leapt as a convoy of vehicles, led by law enforcement and federal agents, barreled down the road. The mercenaries hesitated, their confidence faltering. "This is your last chance," Marcus warned. Realizing they were outmatched, the mercenaries began retreating to their SUVs. The leader shot Marcus a venomous glare. "This isn't over." Marcus's grip on the shotgun tightened. "We'll be ready." As the SUVs sped away, the law enforcement vehicles surrounded the cabin. Agents in tactical gear secured the perimeter while their commanding officer approached Marcus. "Dr. Hay?" the officer asked. Marcus nodded. "Yeah. You got here just in time. We received the distress signal from Dr. Morgan. Looks like you've been through hell." "You have no idea," Marcus said wearily. Inside the cabin, Elijah's tense expression softened when he saw Marcus return unharmed. "You okay?" Elijah asked anxiously. Marcus managed a tired smile. "Yeah. We're safe now." Lila joined them, her relief evident. "The files are in the hands of the right people. Ridgeview's days are numbered." Elijah's shoulders sagged with exhaustion. "We did it." Marcus ruffled the boy's hair. "Yeah, we did." In the days that followed, the fallout from the Ridgeview scandal was massive. The media coverage was relentless, and public outrage forced authorities to launch a full-scale investigation. High-ranking officials and executives were arrested, and the victims of the experiments finally received the justice they deserved. Elijah's story became a symbol of resilience and courage, inspiring countless others to speak out against injustice. One afternoon, Marcus and Elijah stood at a memorial site dedicated to the victims of Ridgeview. Flowers and candles adorned the area, a testament to the lives lost and the strength of those who survived. Elijah placed a single white rose on the memorial plaque bearing his mother's name. "She'd be proud of you," Marcus said softly. Elijah's voice was steady. "I think she always believed I'd find my way." "And you did," Marcus said. "You're not alone anymore, Elijah. You've got a whole future ahead of you." As they walked away from the memorial, the weight of the past began to lift. The scars would remain, but so would the strength they had gained. Together, they had faced the darkness, and emerged into the light.